Hello, hello.
The meeting
Well,
is
ladies and
now.
gentlemen, I think we've done it. I see a little Facebook feed symbol in the corner of my screen. I see the great and magnificent Mark Samuel, and I'm so sorry. I can see myself as well. We are thrilled and excited to be doing another live online Sunday gathering, and one more time with Mark Samuel. This is the greatest opportunity I have to essentially trick Mark into spending time with me, because it's because we can play phone tag for a year. Anyway, but seriously, before I get into Mark, I want to do a few quick announcements, and then we're gonna do a little centering, and we're gonna just dive in because there's so much to say and talk about today. So much. Are you ready to roll, Mark?
Ready to roll. Rock and
Okay.
roll.
Rock and roll. Did you bring your drums today?
No.
Okay, you get the drums. I'll start the announcements.
I have the sticks.
Okay, drum roll. I need a drum roll. All right.
Did you hear it?
So, ladies and gentlemen, we had our first ever online fundraiser. I mean, the real deal. It was called the Pandemic Palooza. If you missed it last night, you need to really rethink your priorities. I'm telling you, it was amazing. It was every bit as wonderful as we'd hoped, and so much more. We had incredible musical talent. It was all live streaming on Facebook and YouTube at the same time. And our dear Susan Stites put this together in the most remarkable way. You've got to check it out. We raised over $3,000 so far, and we are reaching for the stars. So please check it out, Facebook Library or YouTube. And thank you to all the performers, our very own president, Rick, Daryl, Jason, Sandra, John, Gonzalo, Michael, Chris, Richard, Doug, everybody, and anybody I might have forgotten. Please, thank you so much. It was fun and it was cool, and I just don't know what else to say, but I was so proud of our community and what we accomplished. That was cool. Having said that, there's awesome stuff coming up. I'm going to be continuing to have very special guests, although maybe no one quite as special as Mark. We have some evening programs coming up, one with the author, Dr. Ken Harris, who has a new best-selling book called Synchronicity. That's October 5th, I think. You'll find all this on the website, Facebook, and the newsletter. We're going to have Mandaza Kandemwa calling in on a Sunday from South Africa. We are in dialogue with all kinds of great people. So let's just leave it at that. I don't want to waste all this time with announcements. The Mariposa LGBTQ Immigration Beyond Borders event is still going on. So that's this Tuesday and next Tuesday. Please check it out. It's too cool to miss. And one of our very first live in-person small group experiences, Kathy Humphreys will be offering Soul Circles, small intimate group of 6 people, well spaced out, and it's a beautiful time with a facilitator to connect and share about your spiritual journey through this time of change and chaos and triumph. So please sign up soon. We'd love to know if we have a full group there. There are people already signed up. Soul Circles, it starts in about a week. So check it out. Let us know. All right. I think I got it. So Mark, I just finished doing another gathering for our community, the live in-person one. And the theme that we were exploring, and I'm just putting this out there before we do our centering, was really about the heart of transformation, overcoming, evolution, change, facing adversity. And some of the themes that we ended up weaving in were what can we learn from the lives of people like Ruth Bader Ginsburg? And we took some time to remember her life and her legacy, And I also told a funny story about my kids and watching superhero movies this week, and kind of wondering what the message is there, right? These cataclysmic evil empires that are going to destroy the world, and then the last minute, right, the superhero wins the day. Like, what's the theme there? Is it that good prevails? Is it that it helps if you're born on another planet and have a suit with a cape? Like, what? So, and then all of this was sort of highlighted by acknowledging that right now is Rosh Hashanah, and for the Jewish community, for the Jewish tradition, this is like a time in which we reflect on the power that we have in the world, right? So in Rosh Hashanah, it's like this 10-day window when like spirit is closer and the veils between worlds are closer. It's our time to repent, ask forgiveness, make new plans, set intentions. It's like this is the time where it's all inscribed. But this attitude is like a very powerful practice, because we could live like that every day, right? Like that every word is recorded, which I guess on the internet it is. But you know what I'm saying? that how we think, how we show up, that it all matters. And so if it matters, and if there are heroes and champions of change, what's missing in our story? Or what do we have yet to learn or claim? That is more or less where we're headed. So with that in mind, let's take a breath. I'm going to invite you one and all to close your eyes, sit comfortably but alert, and just give yourself a couple of nice, relaxing sighs, right? Like a sigh of relief. Big breath in, notice any tension or tightness in your body, and then just sort of let it go. And with each of these releasing breaths, let your body soften, let your shoulders drop, let the muscles in your face relax. Feeling your own awareness descending from the busyness of the mind and the distraction of the emotions into the heart of your hearts, into the quiet center. And in this place, we affirm, we remember that when our eyes are closed and our hearts are open, we can see and feel things as they truly are, as one. No distance between us, no time stands in the way, that we are all united in the living energy. From this place, each in our own way, and yet together one, we pray that we might each take this journey of awareness, authenticity, and expression, so that we might allow the light, the love, the power that is our source to flow through us, as us, through our unconditional acceptance of ourselves and our deep, deep compassion for the wholeness of each other, our world, and all beings everywhere. Amen.
Amen.
So you're lucky, Mark. You know, for me, that's my prayers and meditations are usually good 45 minutes long, and
Keep going, brother.
keep going. And for the daffodils and the daisies. Anyway, but I really think of this conversation as something very sacred. It's very special to me. For people who don't know, quickly, I met Mark Wow. I
Wow.
met Mark like 20 years ago, actually. And I was working in a healthcare system in Canada, and we were looking for a system of improvement that would not only improve measurable business outcomes, you know, safety and customer satisfaction and so on, but would do so in an environment that created connection, learning, satisfaction, and empowerment for staff. And I came across Mark's work at a hospital in Oregon. So it's a long story, but Mark ended up working with us, helped us really create something extraordinary. And the more and more I followed him around and trained with him and studied with him, you know, eventually he said, dude, you're either going to have to leave me alone or you're going to have to work for me. So I ended up then eventually moving on to work for Mark for a while. And I can say to this day, there are few people on the planet that have influenced how I teach, how I connect with people, how I facilitate, how I consult, as much as Mark did. And Mark's books are about so much more than business. Although if you're in business, he's a genius, and that's you need to check out what he's written. But every time we work together with people, what they were always struck by, and this is all right, I know this is still happening to you, Mark, what everyone was struck by was the power of the ability to apply the wisdom and the approaches that he would share for business in their own lives. So there was never a break when we worked together, because we would facilitate an executive team to like a 10:30 morning lunch break. And then that half hour or 45 minutes was just filled with all the executives coming up one by one. So can we talk about how we apply this to my children and my divorce and my parents and my addiction? I want to just say Mark is really a master of transformation. And that is what we're going to be exploring today. So Mark, I hope people check out everything you've written. I hope they know that B State, your most current book, is a remarkable gift. If anyone is interested in the process of change. And having said that, welcome.
Well, thank you, Jonathan. I so appreciate how you see me. Certainly in many ways better than I see myself. So keep going. No. I really appreciate that. And I just love how we have grown together over the years. It's, you know, it's just been remarkable because I view you as one of my teachers as well. I learned from you because you embody spirit in such a strong way. Your humanness, your humor, your dedication, I just marvel in. So for me, it's definitely mutual learning, mutual growth, and mutual love that inspires me every time we get a chance to talk. So I appreciate you having these webinars so that we can so we can have a little buddy time together.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Well, I was going to say, go on, go on, go on. No, I mean, go on, say more. So, okay, this is perfect because this little mutual adulation club sets me up for one of the main things I actually wanted to start with, which is the topic of confidence, self-acceptance, and authenticity. Now I'm just going to throw a bunch of stuff out and then say, talk about this or explain this. So we look at the life of someone like Ruth Bader Ginsburg. This woman, she was born to be an icon, right? So from the time she was a kid, she questioned social norms. She challenged schools, really, from the time she was a kid. Like, she was driven to be more. She was driven to serve. She was driven to fight for equality. You know, I like to say that everyone knows her because she was the one who would always say, I dissent, right? She was the one that would resist whatever, you know, racial, racist, sexist laws there were. But I like to say, but she wasn't negative. She was actually saying yes, right? She was saying yes to life, yes to equality, yes to togetherness. So the way I sort of explain these sort of iconic personalities is that there is something so potent in who they are that they can't deny it, right? There's something so loud and clear about their mission or their talent that they can't deny it. And it's my personal feeling that the more we are connected to our, whatever you want to call it, true self, soul, authentic purpose, authentic nature, whether that's big or small, doesn't matter, the more we are available to spirit, that spirit works through our most authentic self. Now, having said that, what I also observe, now here's the puzzle, Mark. What I also observe, though, is that we are, as a species, chronically ashamed, feeling unworthy, giving away our power. And I think the thing that puzzles me about that is, on one hand, I have to admit, a lot of people's unworthiness has driven them to find solutions and push themselves to be better. But then on the other hand, I wonder if that's sustainable. I mean, is that an acceptable form of leadership and innovation, or is that dangerous when it comes from not feeling good enough? So let's start with that one, and then I'll get to my next question. How do you see that fine line between people who are driven by sole purpose and people who are driven from the outside in to achieve or prove or feel worthy? Is it the same in the end? Like, do the means really matter, or is there a difference?
But to me, I don't know about everybody, but I can speak to my own transformation. I think that, um, if you're blessed to have that sense of confidence and well-being and clear values and clear direction, then maybe that path is more about driven from within and going for it. That wasn't the case for me. So I come from a case of lower self-esteem, low confidence, a lot of self-doubt, um, and yet maybe a vision of wanting to be better. And so I think that for me, the engine is whatever it is, at whatever point we are. Like, there's no right or wrong or good or bad or better than or less than. It's just simply what's our particular path. And for me, I would say my particular path was, I want to improve myself to better myself because I wasn't good enough. And then I realized, in a painful way, that no matter how much I improved myself, I was still never good enough. So, but what it did was, it gave me more skill, and it raised my consciousness, and it opened my mind in that process to a point where then I could do more activity and work around, well, how do I start to embody that I am good enough, and make that my work, and that my transformation. So I think that there was different stages at different times, but all leading in a way to that point where I could have full self-acceptance and want to keep transforming for the sake of transforming and expanding my love and expanding my goodness and expanding my reach, which I think I'm still on that journey. I don't think I've arrived there yet. And I'm not sure that for me anyway, I'm not sure that there will ever be a part of me that still doesn't go into, at times, that self-doubt, that criticism, the lack of confidence. I experience that now.
Right.
The fear. I've got 3 new major programs coming up, and I'm somewhat, both paralyzed in fear that I won't be successful, and at the same time driven to, not only make it effective, but also enjoy the process along the way. So I've got both going on at the same time.
Okay. So now there's 3 things that really jumped out in what you said. So the first is, and I'm going to phrase this in sort of my worldview or the worldview of the people listening. The first is, in some way, because everything is inside spirit, really.
Yeah.
It's important to be careful that we don't start saying, well, this is the right way to achieve and this is the wrong way to achieve. Because ironically, if what we're talking about is achieving from a place of non-judgment and authenticity, it's like the opposite to label and diminish any achievements we've made because it was fed by a sense of imperfection.
Mm-hmm.
So
Right.
accept your evolution wherever it comes from. Accept your growth wherever it comes from. Then the next thing that I kind of heard is, and as long as you're committed to that growth, even if it's initially fed by insecurity or whatever, it will bring you closer to the place where it starts to become about something else. And then the final piece is that whatever goes on, it's okay, because it's all a part of the human experience. And be careful that we don't think of authenticity as a destination. One day we cross the line and finally everyone in my life reflects me and my job reflects me and everything reflects me. It's going to be a dance as we evolve. Did I get that right?
Yeah. You hit that perfectly, and said eloquently and faster than I did. But and I think there is one more piece to it. And I think that there is this, for me anyway, the challenge of the ego, because
Yeah.
it's, we often think of the ego as the one that's, uh, overconfident or even arrogant or overpowerful, but it's also the ego that puts us down.
Right.
It's the ego that sets us up in a world, in a duality that says we're not good enough.
Right.
And so for me, it's about how do I work with that voice of the ego? Not that the ego is bad or wrong or anything. It's just that part of me that can put me in that duality of good or bad or right or wrong or weak or what have you. And how do I begin to let go of that to just be present? Like at the end of the day, that's my salvation. Like no matter how stressed I get and no matter how fearful I get or how overwhelmed I get, at some point it's your centering process. Just breathe. Know that God and spirit is breathing you, and just be. It's okay.
Yeah. So you not surprisingly started into something that I literally was on my mind that I wanted to ask you about. So it's sort of my own little aha, but I'm curious if it resonates for you. And I don't know that I can articulate it or understand it fully, but maybe you can. I think of so let's just use the word soul for lack of a better word. True self, right? I think of the true self as kind of like an energy body inside us, sort of.
Yes.
And when we're in that true self, it is let's say closer to spirit than when we're identified with our ego.
Yes.
But the tricky thing is this, because anything that's closer to spirit innately has more trouble with boundaries, right? Because spirit is boundless, has more, is more responsive and sensitive, that the actual period of life in which we are more ego identified is in fact a preparation to bring the soul forward. In other words, if we don't have the training that the ego brings to us to learn about boundaries, to learn about shame and pleasure and all these dualities, if we don't have that, then going into the true self actually could be kind of a mess. Did that make any sense? Like, I
Yeah.
think everyone has this
Oh,
idea that we shouldn't have gotten away from our souls if only we all just stayed like we were 4 years old. Like, I imagine 4-year-olds would be destroyed by this world, and that all the horrible things that we label happening to us are actually pretty important so that we can then put them down and be more authentic. Did that make any sense?
well, to me, absolutely,
Here.
because, you know, I, I look at it as we're placed on a physical planet in a physical realm. And it's the ego that helps us live in the physical world reality that we're in now. It's just not our ultimate reality, nor is it our forever reality. So, but that's the whole point, is that we've asked to be put on the physical realm to grow our, our ego and our ability to place in the world. And then the challenge is really, in a sense, how do we stay connected to our spiritual and entity and that life force within us and live in the physical world? And how do we live that dance? And how, in a way, it's how do we advance to that next leading edge of physical world reality, spiritual world, and how we bring that together as one. And I just think we're always on that leading edge of gaining physical world reality skill while gaining spiritual attunement, asking,
Yeah. Uh,
and
it,
going for both. Yeah.
what's interesting about that, Mark, is I have often told people that one of my greatest spiritual teachers was actually a business consultant. And I talk about how when I worked with you and learned what makes a business system more effective, I actually found that it made my spiritual life more effective. Like, all
Mm-hmm.
the rules of accountability, structure, expectation, clear roles, it all worked in my spiritual life. That spirituality was actually not a domain of, do whatever you feel and everything goes and everything works. There was actually this incredibly important transfer of skills and knowledge. And then, of
Yes.
course, goes the other way too.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, one of my teachers put it really nicely. They said there's the goal line and then there's the soul line. and if you just go on the goal line, you can get more and more money and more things and all that, but it doesn't lead to satisfaction. If you're just on the soul line, you can have lots of learning and growth, but you can't necessarily live in the world. And it's really, how do you bring the
Ooh, I
soul
like
line to the goal line and make that your partnership,
right.
so that as you address the goal line in the physical world reality, we keep bringing spirits consciousness and attunement. Yes, exactly. Exactly.
That's so
Yes.
cool.
That's,
And
it's really
probably the
cool.
curve starts like this, right? It starts low because we're oriented
Yeah.
around goals because we want approval. And then it increases, but they're never severed.
Right. And it's hard to say where it starts, because I just read a little story. This woman was talking about her 4-year-old son, and she was talking about how to make cheese. And they were just in the kitchen. The kid's 4 years old, and he asked, "Well, how does milk turn into cheese?" And she goes, "Really, I'm not a cheesemaker, so I don't know." She's basically trying to get out of the conversation, which is probably what I would do too. And the kid thinks for a minute, stops for a minute, and says, "Well, oh, you have to add good bacteria to the milk and it becomes cheese." And it just shocked her. Like, well, where did you get that? Did you see that in a movie? Did you see that like online? Some, like, where, how did you get that? And he stops for a moment and goes, "My brain told me." And it
Yeah.
was like, wow. Now you're talking about real attunement, because I don't doubt if he even knows what bacteria means, or good bacteria versus bad bacteria. But all of a sudden, he was given a message, downloaded it in a physical world reality answer.
Okay. So let me ask you a question about that, because I totally I relate to that. I love that story because it speaks to the fact that you affirm that we are these multidimensional beings and that we're here on this earth and in this earth body, but there is such a thing as intuition. There is such a thing as connection. There is such a thing as guidance. Now, this is a huge question, and I don't even know if it's specific enough for you, but is there a way that you recommend or that you see as effective people finding that balance between being open and attuned to their center so they can be guided, but also engaged and purposeful in the world? I think for a lot of us, it kind of feels very one or the other. I'm either lost in my relationship or my job, and I forget about my spiritual practice, or I'm so in my spiritual practice that I don't really want to work and I don't really want to deal with people. Is there any hope for creating balance, or how do you do that?
Well, I don't know if it's balance. For me, I would say it's more of a muscle, because I unlike many people, at least a lot of people I've met, I was never geared toward, I was not consciously geared towards what I would call the spiritual realm. Um, it just, it wasn't something I believed in. I didn't believe in intuition growing up. I never had anyone around me that was modeling what I would call inspiration or spiritual attunement. That was not. My dad was an engineer. Everything was practical, and uh, it's something I actually just didn't believe in. So for me, I'm oriented towards goal line thinking. But as I started to become more aware and awakened to intuition, spirituality, etc., then I've developed a practice go of going silent more often. So
Mm.
I live in the realm of I don't know, help me. Because I don't view myself very smart, but I do now experience myself as a pretty good listener, where if I don't know something, I don't pretend to know what I don't know. I accept that I don't know. And then I allow myself to open up and listen. Is there an answer to provide, like that little 4-year-old did? And my guess is I probably had that as a 4-year-old and cut it off at some point, or had it, you know, not reinforced by, because my parents didn't have that consciousness. But it's not that it was never there. If I have it now, it must have been there when I was 4. But the question is, how do I awaken to it? And how do I spend more time in centering? How do I spend more time in my own silence? How do I spend more time in meditation? How do I keep listening? And then as I listen, if I don't understand it, act on it anyway. And so that I keep reinforcing that
Testing it.
I'm not, yeah, I keep testing it, keep working it as much as I can. And it's an evolution for me. It's like there are places I do it better than places. Like, as an example, the first place I learned to do that was at work, but I couldn't apply it in my personal life. In my personal life, I'd freak out and get worried and get fearful, and all that noise of my own fears and worries and concerns makes it so I'm not available to listen.
Right.
So I learned it there, and then my prayer was, how do I get this in my personal life? How do I get, well, and slowly but surely, and through other mentors like my wife and like you as an example, you all teach me how to do that more in my personal life.
So, gosh, my mind's going in all these different directions with questions I want to ask you, but where you just ended really strikes to the heart of where I felt, or where my mind was when we began, which is, can you say something about how you made the transition in your personal life? So this, I don't know the right language, but I know exactly what you're talking about. You know, being able to find that inner calm and listening in your work, not having it happen at home. Usually that doesn't happen at home for most of us because our power is displaced. We're either fearful of the other, or we're needing the other's approval, or whatever it is. And there's this thing about putting, you know, for lack of a better word, putting the power back. And you know, in the live service we were talking about superheroes, and I was joking about that. But you know, there's always this energy thing here, right? Shazam and Iron Man and Superman and the Eagle. It's like there's this thing about, so what defines all the superhero stories is not the triumph over evil, and it's not super skills or the great battle that's the highlight of the movie or story. It's actually the journey of overcoming their doubt, right?
Yeah.
It's always a story that they've somehow displaced themselves. They didn't think they could do it. They fell away. They stopped being for a while. They, you know, there's always this overcoming of self that has to happen first, reclaiming one's power, integrating one's power. So I get that it's an ongoing process for you, but do you think there's something that you did or that people can do to feel their own authority? I don't really know the right words, to feel that shift from, you know, from listening to the other away from, you know, wanting approval or permission. Do you know what I'm saying? How
I
do you
do,
put
and
that back in there when it's been out there all your life?
well, and I'm not for me, again, it's a process. So the first thing I had to do was make a very clear decision that I was going to surround myself with people who see me better than I see myself. So in other words, whether it's my wife or wives in this case, or friends, um, it do people believe in me when I stop believing in myself? Those are the people I want to hang around, because until I
Mm.
had the strength internally, I had to rely on those people, and they'd be very frustrated with me because many times I have a pretty strong personality. I might even debate and argue with them how messed up I am and have them tell me how not messed up I am, until, you know, literally that was its own growth process. And then I think so to me that's one big part of it. I think a second big part of it is self-forgiveness, because self-forgiveness is
Uh,
about how do I forgive myself for the judgments I place against myself, and really getting into a practice of that, because I was so judgmental on myself. Like that took, it even took me, I remember when I was first given the technique, it took me 7 months for me to even feel a sense of self-forgiveness. After I had to just do it rotely over and
mhm,
over and
mhm.
over again. Finally, I could feel it. And then I could expand on that feeling, but I still have to practice it. And then it was, then the next stage of it was, how do I start to embody that myself without worry that the ego was going to take over, become arrogant? You know, like how do I feed and build on my own strengths without it then becoming dogmatic or arrogant or anything like that? So all of that debate went through, and
Mm.
now again it's still more of a subtle dance of am I open to receiving it? And my wife now, all, you know, she'll compliment me, and she said, did you hear it? Did you take it in? Nope. She said, well, that went right on by, didn't it? You know, she kids me about it, but it's still my edge, you know. And until I receive it,
Yeah.
until I can hear it and take it in, you know, what most people don't know is at one of my programs, and I think you went to it, it was like the mastership. We have a process at the end where we're all acknowledging each other, and then
Oh,
people
yeah,
want to
yeah.
acknowledge me. Well, I had my hand under the table, literally pinching with my nails my leg, because the receiving was so painful. The only
Yeah.
way I could offset it until I'd bleed. Like it was that, you know, it's
Uncomfortable.
like it was that uncomfortable. So it's how, that's just our own journeys. But I do think that one is, who do we surround ourselves by? Second, do we have a sense of self-forgiveness when we see ourselves get harsh on ourselves? And what's our prayer for being kind, and our intention for being as kind to ourselves as we are with others? Because that's my orientation, is I'm much kinder, much more forgiving of others than I am with myself. How do I embody that? And then slowly work in our process to,
Yeah, let me jump in. This thing about
yeah,
self-forgiveness is so powerful, and I think you've just presented it in a way that probably most people listening have never thought about it, which is, I'm going to again interpret it. Anytime I'm in conflict, so this is the way I'm hearing it. Anytime I'm in conflict with another, or maybe more accurately, anytime I'm giving away my power, right? To let someone's approval matter more, to make someone or give someone the power so that I could be fearful, any of those kinds of giving away of my power, that is actually a moment where unconsciously I am in self-judgment.
yes, oh,
Because
absolutely,
I may not see it as that moment,
right,
I may not see it as the root, but it's the only real explanation for why I'd give away my power. Because I'm not smart
yes,
enough, because I'm not good enough, because I'm not worthy without that. So self forgiveness becomes this almost like a searchlight that helps us feel into what the pain that's really behind giving away power. Did that make sense?
yes, yes. And just for everyone who's listening, I want to be very clear about something. You're never self-forgiving. You're never forgiving mistakes you made. That doesn't require any forgiveness. You're not forgiving the fact that you shouted at your daughter or son or spouse. You're not forgiving that. That doesn't need forgiveness. That's called humanness showing up. It's, you're forgiving the judgment you place against yourself, or the judgment you place against somebody else. That's what you're forgiving.
Right.
And it's a bit tricky, because at first my idea of forgiveness was, oh, I made a mistake, you know, I have to ask for forgiveness, and that may be true for the relationship, but for your relationship, it's the judgment you place against yourself for saying, oh, I should know better, I shouldn't have done that, I was out of line, I was whatever that is that puts you down. No, 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 that's just part of being human. That doesn't require forgiveness. It's the sin, quote unquote, is the judgment you place against yourself.
Okay, so I'm jumping in now. So now you've brought us to a new topic, which is the topic of acceptance. This is a complicated topic that I often talk about here, which is that it's only in the deepest and most radical uh, extensions of acceptance or embrace of acceptance that we can hear clearly and take action. And yet the fear that people have is, well, wait a second, but if I accept myself as I am and forgive myself for being angry or being late or being lazy or whatever it is, then I'm going to do it again. Like somehow there's a story that
Yeah,
acceptance means permission. Like if I
correct.
accept the crap that I see in the political world, it means I tolerate it. If I accept that there are racist people, that somehow I'm as bad as them. But acceptance and permission are totally different things. And yet we seem to be fearful that acceptance will allow us to stay stuck. But that's not really true in your experience, is it?
No, and you were talking earlier about Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and she was a master. She was masterful at this, because she never went against somebody. She and again, apparently that was from her childhood upbringing, but she always then learned, how do I make the case for something? So it was a,
Mm.
she did it in a very interesting way. But I'm going to put it to a different slant. When you do self-forgiveness, that is a form of loving. And so what happens is our loving gets expanded. So it's
Mm,
not the acceptance, it's not that, oh, I've accepted something negative, so I'm going to end up doing it again. No, not really, because it's in the self-forgiveness that your loving expands. And so your expression of loving is what takes over. And you actually become more loving and more compassionate and more caring and more understanding of others. And in that way, it doesn't cause you to go back and make the mistakes again, because it's no longer even a part of you as much as the loving has taken over.
yeah.
And that's the beautiful part of the dance of transformation. We have our guilt, we have our resentments, we have all those disturbances. When we apply loving to those disturbances, then our loving expands,
Right.
and
You know,
therefore our understanding expands. Yes.
you actually did an exercise in one of your classes that I was in, I don't know, 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And this is like a revision of it. So if
Mhm.
people look, it's sort of like this is the sum totality of me and my behaviors and aspects, and I label some good and some bad.
Right.
And it wasn't the same, but what you had was for each quality that you can extend forgiveness, color it in. And it was like, oh, okay,
Yeah.
well, I can quickly and easily color in all the good stuff. Okay, well, that's cool. But what if that forgiveness is really just love?
Yeah.
And so as you start to forgive and love the bad things, the sum
That's
total
right.
outcome is just your expansion of love.
Yeah.
Period. It doesn't even matter what it's loving, it's that you are engaged in a more full and comprehensive experience of love. No?
Absolutely. And just think about it, when if you have a child that spilled milk or something and they're distraught about it, and what you do is your response is, don't worry about it, you'll spill it again later. It's not like I'm going to set up a rule that you never spill milk. It's ridiculous. You will spill it. Don't worry. And I'm going to hug you and I'm going to love you, and it's okay. And we accept that humanness in that child. Look at all the loving that gets expanded in that mode. And that to me
Right.
is a, and honestly, that's how I had to picture doing self-forgiveness. I had to pretend I was that child who didn't know better, who
Right.
couldn't do better in that moment. And how would I embrace, and how do I treat? It's not just self-forgiveness as a technique. It's self-forgiveness from the sense of, how would I treat
Oh,
that child as if that child were me?
okay. So here's another big one, and we're gonna just try to we've got about 7 minutes left. It's
I know.
crazy how the time goes. So okay, so I had a very similar situation actually just yesterday with my daughter. Now, remarkably, I can't remember exactly what it is because I have a lot of these situations with my daughter. She gets into things, okay? She's one of those pull it apart, take it apart, unplug it, spill it, whatever. So she did something that was in the moment pretty annoying, right? So maybe she asked for a drink. I gave her a glass of water. She looked at, I think this is what it was. She looked at this big art project we just finished, and then she was like destroyed it. And and she looked at me and she said, like, you could see she had this worry, and she kind of said, "That's okay, right?" Like, and so I took a breath and I found that loving place. And I said, well, you know what, honey? It's not really great. It's not really okay when with a loving energy, I said, it's not really okay when somebody works really hard on something and then you ruin it, or when you make a mess, and we've talked about making messes, but it happens. I just need you to try not to do that. You understand what I'm saying? And she just looked at me and she was like, okay, got it.
That's
And that was
great.
it. Like, she literally said, okay, got it. Like, okay, you're not angry at me, but we're not going to do this again. And I was like, yeah, that's it. But
Wow,
here's the
so clean.
question.
Yeah,
But here's the
beautiful.
question, right? Like, in relationships, in work, in parenting, I think we all have our own fear that what we want for the outcome is so out of control that we have
Well,
to threaten. We
yes.
have to threaten. You know what? If you
Well,
do that again, we're not doing another art project.
yeah.
If you don't do your homework, you're not getting video games. If you don't show up to work on time, you're not going to have a job. What? How do we break that cycle of wanting to control through
Mm.
fear? I mean, what is that all about?
Well, I think you're raising to me just the most important and essential point of all of this conversation, and that is our need for control. And and how do we give that up with the true understanding God is in control. I'm not in control. I can do my part and I'm a partner in that, but it's really God who's there breathing me. I'm not in control of that. It's how do I allow for any, and here's how I play it. When something good, and here you'll see, get a snapshot of my ego issues. When something good happens, God was involved. When something bad happens, it was my screw up. It's all me. And the truth is that's not real. It's like, no, God is part of everything. And when I am, and again, I had to learn it through work, because there were times when I was just so depressed, distraught, tired, overwhelmed for whatever reason. Sometimes it was emotional, sometimes it was physical based on my schedule, where I had nothing. And I have a whole 8-hour day with a group. And literally, I'm brought to my knees and I said, okay, Spirit, you have to run this session because I am not here. And those would be my best sessions by far, because I'm just, in a way, the physical world reality took me out of the equation, physically took me out, where I only had spirit, or I'd be a bumbling idiot. And so, that has been a teacher for me to keep letting go. And again, I have people around me that remind me of that, because my big issue is running out of money, or my business not doing well, or whatever fear that is. And I have to be brought back to, no, God's in charge. God's going to take care of this. How do I trust in God? How do I believe in that? How do I have faith? How do I do the best I can to put the control over to God and just show up to do what I can do? So it's, instead of me controlling it, it doesn't mean I'm a bystander. It's not like, okay, I'm going to take off today. You make it happen, God. It's not that. It's partnership where I show up and do the best I can, given whatever situation I'm in, and that may be very little given where I'm at that point, and know that God's present, working on behalf. And sometimes the only thing I can do is have an affirmation or a prayer. Maybe that sometimes is the best I can do. But that's okay, that's enough. But then as God participates, am I showing up? If I get that intuition, do I act on it? If it says call somebody I'm uncomfortable with, do I make the call? Like, that to me is how I gain that cooperation, doing full circle to what we started with in our conversation today.
Yeah, and what it reminds me, taking us back to the beginning of this part of the conversation, is that actually the attitude of acceptance and love, or loving acceptance, is in fact, at least in terms of skill and practice, one of the ways to potentiate our ability to see and hear clearly. Right? Because if
Yes.
we're too caught up in the control or judgment, then it's harder to act skillfully. And so it's this
Right.
incredible paradox of sort of surrender to achieve.
Yes.
Okay, now we are definitely out of time, but I still want to ask you another question, and then we're going to say a quick little something to go. But do you have a couple more minutes?
Yeah.
Okay, just a couple more?
Yeah, just a couple more.
Okay. Do you believe that this consciousness that we're talking about, which maybe for argument's sake we're just going to call spiritual consciousness, is it inevitable? Do you see that great leaders over time innately become more, quote, spiritual, that great organizations that last innately become more spiritual, couples, families. Is that just what's sustainable? Or or am I just wishful thinking?
Well, I think that we're all on a progression. So I think that we're always on that progression. The question is, we're bound by the time frame of the physical existence we're in at the moment. And if we can hold the thought that there's multiple physical existences, that, boy, that spectrum could be quite long, then we just don't know where we've been that we're having to learn from, and what we're going to learn in our next chapter, if you would. So, there's some people, obviously, that the more power they gain, the more control they want.
Oh, right.
And therefore they're still on that, stuck on the goal line, hoping for more and hoping to be validated and whatever. And it may not be this lifetime that they get out of that, or it may be in just before their last breath that they get the awareness. Like, we don't know that.
Yeah.
But the spectrum is longer than a lifetime, if you believe in that, so that it extends over multiple lifetimes of learning and growth. And all we're catching it is right now.
Yeah, I love that. And that's a great point to end on, which is to say, if you want to find hope, take the long view.
Yeah.
And that we don't need to lie to ourselves about what's going on to try to make it, spiritualize it, to say that it's all good. It might not all be, so to speak, good in the moment, but it doesn't mean that it's ultimately not ultimately in service of our growth, our evolution, our healing. Well, Mark, do you need to jump? Do you want me to let you go and I'll say goodbye to the gang, or do you have a minute?
Please say goodbye to the gang, and I definitely want to, get your centering to end this.
Yeah,
because I can that will feed me really well for the rest of my day.
Very good. So
I appreciate it.
Well, there's 1,000 more things we could discuss, and yet all the answers are here with us now. If only we can slow down and return to that place in ourselves which lives in all things. So let's do that. Thank you, Mark, for being with us.
Yeah.
So good. So much great energy, such great wisdom. Please remember, everyone, you can donate online while you're watching these gatherings. There's probably a little link right there. We really are grateful for your generosity and support. It pays our staff. It keeps our building going. So thank you for that. And it's a testament to what you believe in the world and what you stand behind. We want to create this harbor for people that is safe to grow and explore together. Kathy's Soul Circles is coming up. Tim Wilson has Love Across Borders. Lots of new classes that are going to be promoted by the end of the week, so stay tuned. And now let's tune in. Eyes closed, sitting comfortably but alert. We're just going to take a quiet moment and feel yourself settling down, feeling your way into the softness and the silence of your interior. And through your breath, finding, even if it's just a glimpse, that quiet place that we can feel, where there's no need for judgment or rightness or wrongness. May we remember and return to this place of stillness, that our relationship to the world as our family might be renewed. The place in which we see the beauty of the world in each moment and awaken to the beauty of spirit that we are uniquely. And through the sharing of that, may we each be a part of the elevation, the blessing, the loving of this world. For the peace and the wholeness of all beings everywhere. Amen.
Amen.
Well, thank you, Mark.
Thank you,
We'll let people know.
Jonathan.
And if they want to look you up, is it Mark Samuel, or should they also look up the B State website?
Yeah, the B State is probably the best place. It's just bstate.com. And just for anyone who wants to know, I'm actually starting a 5-day challenge on going from in-person workshops to virtual. How do you make that transition for transformational programs? So how do you do that?
That's
And
great.
I have no idea how you'd find out about it. The best place to do it, honestly, there's got to be a link or something, but it's if you email me if you're interested, you can email me at mark@bstate.com. Very simple, MARK@bstate.com, and I'll get you information. Yeah.
Yeah, and if they don't remember, they can find me. Yeah. And I'll connect them to you, or they can go. That's amazing. That's a really cool idea for a program.
Yeah, I'm really excited about it.
Great. Well, thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you, Jonathan. Appreciate. Love you, brother.
Love you, brother.